dossier. Let's bring in our A-team this morning. There he is, Brad Blakeman, former Deputy Assistant to President George W. Bush. Noah Rothman, Associate Editor of Commentary Magazine, and Michael Blakeman, DNC Vice Chair and New York State Assemblyman.
Welcome,
Wonderful
guys.
to have you all here this morning. So this is happening right now, right, Brad? Bruce Orr is sitting down. We saw him walk into the room this morning. We saw Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows on their way in. They are likely to be grilling him behind those closed doors.
Right.
What do you expect to come out of it? Well,
I'm anxious to hear the leaking that comes out of it, but as an American, I want to see them not behind closed doors. I want to see Orr in the hot seat where the world can see him.
Well, some say this gives the lawmakers a chance to, not put on a show for the TV cameras and ask the real questions, try to get some answers.
Well, I think that we could have gotten some real answers before the American people. And what I'm very much concerned about is Orr's relationship with Steele. When the FBI cut him off, Orr continued this relationship. Orr's wife was an employee of Fusion GPS. Mm-hmm. This whole dossier was used in order to surveil a political opponent of Hillary Clinton. This stinks from the top to the bottom.
Do you think there was a conspiracy here because you've got him meeting supposedly 60 times?
Absolutely.
Or not meeting, but having texts and communications and meeting with Glenn Simpson and with Christopher Steele.
There's no doubt that the FBI at the highest levels was bending over backwards to do things that they would not do in any other case, and using information against a candidate for president. It's unheard of.
Michael, do you buy that?
So let's make sure we just don't ignore what just happened. You just conveyed yes to the question on conspiracy, which is as ludicrous as this would sound right now. Let's talk about the facts of the matter. When we talk about how the warrant was issued, it was not because of the dossier, it was because of what happened with Papadopoulos. That was conveyed, number one. Number two, when we think about credibility, clearly there's no real credibility when it comes to Devin Nunes and all that's been happening, especially when you talk about closed doors and behind closed doors in that aspect, saying we need to do these things to be able to protect President Trump. So I agree in the one aspect, of course, there should be transparency, but let's not ignore the critical element that was just conveyed, where you actually just said yes in agreeing and you think this is a conspiracy.
No, there's a conspiracy in the FBI. There's a conspiracy
the question that was asked is, do you believe it's a conspiracy? The question was asked, do you believe this is a conspiracy?
Yeah, on the part of the FBI. That was the question.
And that's a pretty ludicrous statement to convey that you believe that there's a conspiracy happening.
Congressman Darrell Issa was on this program, and he suggested that that Bruce Orr and his wife Nellie Orr should admit, quote, that they were part of a conspiracy against Donald Trump. So this isn't just the theory of his. You're hearing this from members of Congress. I want to get Noah in here.
Yeah, what we know about Bruce Orr's relationship with Christopher Steele and when he talked to the FBI is it did, according to Justice Department officials on background, talked to ABC News, for example, they say it went beyond his remit. Nellie Orr was a consultant for a political consultancy. We don't know what her relationship was. She was a Russian speaker. She probably was contracted to do some Russian speaking work, and that's far from being an employee. Finally, though, and the most important point, I'm the only person on this panel who thinks we shouldn't be transparent about all this. We used an unprecedented maneuver to get the Nunes memo out of committee, another one to get the Schiff memo out of committee. We put a FISA memo in front of the public. According to the New York Times, Russian sources, America's sources that report to the CIA have gone to ground. We do not talk to them anymore as a result of perhaps, most likely in fact, the outing of a CIA informant who's a former Republican guy working at Cambridge University. This is all unprecedented. It's really bad for national security, and there's a reason why it's called a representative republic. We're not supposed to be privy to this information.
But as long as the American public doesn't have all the facts, they're in the dark. And some people think there's a conspiracy by the FBI to get Donald Trump. Others do not believe that at all, think it's all a political talking point. Doesn't the American people deserve an answer about what was going on in this government on both sides?
The responsibility for being clear to the American public falls on their elected representatives. We shouldn't be putting FISA memos in front of the public and allowing them to judge raw intelligence on its merits. That's not what they're supposed to do, and that's going to result in more confusion, more conspiracy thinking, and more distrust in the government.
Well, we spoke to Congressman Mark Meadows, who's fired up about all of this, on his way into that room this morning. I asked him, what is at stake?
When we really look at it, 99% of the DOJ and FBI workers are truly great patriots. And yet we have about 7 or 8 that took things into their own hand. And so it's the credibility of really Lady Justice that should have a blindfold. And yet we're seeing that they were peeking and trying to tilt justice one way or another based on their own political bias.
That's a lot.
Well, we talk about, again, political bias. Devin Nunes at a fundraiser conveyed that the Republicans need to keep the majority in order to protect Donald Trump and to avoid continual investigation. So if we want to talk about bias, let's talk about the ones that are overseeing the investigation. Now, I do acknowledge there's absolute legitimacy in making sure you have some information that is protected. No question about that. However, we can't ignore that there is confusion that exists, and whether it be having redacted material of some sort, some information should be out there. Why are you going behind closed doors, given the magnitude of what's happening right now?
Is there an argument, do you think, that there should be some release of material that's unredacted? You can protect sources and methods, but let some of this unredacted material get out there.
Look, there's no question that ordinarily, I would agree too, that sources, methods should be protected in order for the national interest. But not in this case, where there's a cloud over the FBI and the American people are outraged at the incestuous nature of the FBI getting involved in politics and using sources and methods that are really unheard of. So yes, we need to open this up. And the cleansing, I think, will be helpful not only to the institutions, but also to restore confidence in our. All
right. Well, that closed-door interview is going to go on for hours today. It was suggested by members of Congress as they were on their way in there this morning. So we'll see what comes out of all that. Meanwhile, the attorney representing Michael Cohen, Lanny Davis, got to ask what's going on with him, because he is now backtracking on some comments he made in an interview, admitting that he was the anonymous source for that bombshell story on Trump Tower. Here he is on CNN.
Well, I think the reporting of the story got mixed up, and in the course of a criminal investigation, we were not the source of the story.
So he says the reporting on the story got mixed up. So backtracking on what he said earlier.
It's called lying. When you know you're the anonymous source, you're asked about it, you lie about it, it comes out, you are the source. First of all, Lanny has a long history of partisan representation. You know, Cohen, the last hire should be Lanny to represent you. And the fact is, Lanny played too cute, he lied, and now he's shot his credibility and he's hurting his client.
What if it's just a misstatement, or he misremembered? You know these terms they use? It's a misstatement. I misremembered.
Doesn't pass the smell test.
Michael, he admitted he was the anonymous source to BuzzFeed. Here he said, "I made a mistake. I did not mean to be cute."
What's cute is when I listen to Republicans talk to me about lying or not lying. Let's go back to the actual focus of the element. The meeting was supposedly about Russian adoption. So now we're out here talking about Lanny Davis. At the end of the day, let's make sure we have a president of the United States. We have all those around him that have consistently lied about what's happening here.
What do you think about Lanny Davis and what's happening here?
It's quite frankly secondary in the grand scheme of things. We're talking about
He's
him
the
being
attorney
a source.
Representing Michael Cohen.
Michael Cohen, who was the attorney for the President of the United States, where they repeatedly lied throughout. So yes, we can acknowledge it is wrong for him claiming him from an anonymous source, but the more critical issue is that they lied throughout this entire effort.
This shouldn't be surprising to anybody. The second that Mike Cohen took a deal, Lanny Davis began chewing the scenery, being very dramatic and saying, "My client shall not accept a pardon from that rapscallion in the White House." He was being as theatrical as possible in order to ingratiate himself with the resistance, the Democratic left. And he was saying whatever felt good in the moment. And among those things is that my client has information about Russian collusion. That's what they wanted to hear. He was telling them what they wanted to hear.
Michael, do you think, final thoughts, that there was collusion, that meeting was a conspiracy with the Russian lawyer?
I won't use the word conspiracy, but we do know that they lied. I mean, they said it was about adoptions. They conveyed on Air Force One that they were working on it. So the reality is you have an administration and those around them that have been lying, and I think that is the core issue we should be focused on.
Do you think that shows coordination with the Russian government?
We don't know that, but what we do know is that the Trump administration and those around him have been consistently lying about what has been happening in this effort.
All right, that is it for the first part of our A-Team. Thank you, guys. We'll see you again in just a few minutes.
Meanwhile, there's some new